Good day, everyone. Welcome to ABPN's first South Asia Impact Capital Festival. I'm Kevin Teo, COO at ABPN, and I'm glad you're able to join us today. Many of you have been following the festival since last week, but for those of you new to ABPN, we are a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mission is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourselves opportunities to connect with key stakeholders across various sectors and markets, to learn from one another, and to find opportunities for action. We will be sharing highlights of our day live on Twitter, so don't forget to share your experience with us by using the hashtags ABPN South Asia 2021 and hashtag Impact Capital. Throughout the month of February, the festival will spotlight best practices and solutions that ABPN members are delivering across India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. Last week, we focused on healthcare, and you can access all recordings through the agenda link on the platform. Our focus moves to livelihoods for this week, and we will continue on to climate action and education thereafter. Before moving to the program proper, please note that this session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recordings for 3 weeks after the festival. Our partners have set up virtual booths with useful guides and resources. Please click on the Festival Partners tab to chat with the relevant partner representatives. We encourage you to also chat with your speakers and fellow delegates in this session, and you can do this through the chat tab located next to the streaming window. Please also send me and my panelists any questions through the Q&A tab. The South Asia labor market is currently at an interesting juncture, home to the world's largest and youngest population, all poised to enter the workforce in 2030. The COVID-19 pandemic, however, has considerably affected the pace at which skill development and related policies and projects would have been otherwise implemented in these countries. We've seen mass migrations during the lockdown, slowdowns in industrial sector growth, and these economies are trying hard to bounce back. Over the course of this week, you will hear from different members on their developments in the various markets. We start off today's sessions with a fireside chat on unlocking capital in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. In India, most of the strategic philanthropy donors and social investors are based in the metros of Tier 1 cities: Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, and Chennai. Research suggests that while most donors and investors do not have geographical preferences for funding, very few of them fund programs in remote areas. There are many reasons, but one of the key issues is they find it difficult to regularly visit the program implementation sites in these areas, making monitoring and evaluation of the funded programs difficult to achieve. There are local foundations, trusts, and societies in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, but they overwhelmingly believe in traditional philanthropic practices and mainly fund religious and community-based initiatives that may have limited outreach. We believe that understanding the local context of poverty is an important element in deciding how to give. Strategic and structured philanthropy is based on the fundamental principle of engaging directly with the beneficiary and helping in ways that they find meaningful, and instead of giving what we think they need. For this session, we seek to hear from my two esteemed panelists on the severe needs outside of Tier 1 cities, their experience and journey in addressing these issues, including the challenges encountered, and adaptations they have made along the way. We hope to inspire others to follow in these steps through their sharing and to mobilize more resources towards Tier 2 and 3 and rural areas to enable livelihood development. Jen Mehta has had a career spanning 4 decades in the Army before he joined the Hans Foundation. A highly decorated civilian, after his retirement, he was at the helm of the Hans Foundation as CEO and steered its course with great leadership and vision. Alkesh leads the poverty alleviation portfolio for BMGF's India Country Office, which comprises programmatic work in agriculture development, water, sanitation and hygiene, financial services for the poor, and gender equality. Alkesh joined BMGF in 2003 and was one of the key members who helped conceptualize and implement the $338 million Avahan program, the AIDS initiative of the world's largest HIV/AIDS prevention program. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the introduction.
So prior to, hi Alkesh and Jen Mehta, and for those of you joining us on this call, prior to this session, we were just talking about how many of us incidentally connected through the armed forces in some way. Jen Mehta with his long career history there, and Alkesh, whose father was a senior officer, and myself having to do national service in Singapore. Maybe we'll start with Jen Mehta. If you could share with us how you came into the foundation space after your long tenure at the Army. Jen Mehta, please.
Good afternoon, Kevin, and good afternoon to the viewers. Let me just tell you that I have an engineering background, and I'm narrating my story how I entered the Army just before we started the session. So I was sharing it with Kevin and Alkesh. So after 40 years of service, I was looking for a second career, and being like I was in a highly technical field, I was managing missiles and radars in the Army. I was one of the specialists on missiles. So I was looking for an opening in the corporate world. But then I met someone who had, we were attending an engagement ceremony, and this guy suggested, why don't you look at, doing some charity work, and why don't you look at some foundation where you can, bring in your experience. I had a very different view of the NGO sector. I said, what are you talking about? So he insisted, and then there was a meeting with our chairperson, Mrs. Shweta Rawat, on Skype from the US. And then I met the co-founder, who is Mr. Manoj Bhargav. He is a known personality. He is a billionaire. He is a NRI, and he is a prime funder for the Hans Foundation. I would say the only funder for the Hans Foundation. So he has committed 90% of his wealth for the Hans Foundation, for charity in India. And when I met him, it was a very interesting, encounter. I thought he'll ask me questions about what is your knowledge about the, this field, but nothing of that sorts happened. And we started talking about the technology. He is a person who believes that he can change the world through technology. And he has 2 invention shops in US, and he told me what inventions he is doing. And because of that, I got very much interested in the personality he has. And I decided, I was in talks with a couple of, corporate industries like L&T and all. And I said, let me give it a try. And I found it very interesting, and that's where the journey started. So
thanks for that, Jen Mehta.
And our encounter was we were to meet for 15 minutes. It carried on for, I think, about 1 hour, 30 minutes. So that's how I got interested, and I joined the Hans Foundation.
That's great to hear that. And Alkesh, you've been with BMGF since 2003. We were talking about what's the typical tenure of a Gates Foundation employee.
Yes, it's not 18 years.
Yeah. Maybe you can share a bit about sort of how you see the Gates Foundation overall strategy fitting into your current work, and sort of your journey so far over the many years that you've been there.
Yeah. So, a large theme of our foundation is, as General Mehta also said, about discovery and development and R&D, and that is primarily run out of our Seattle office. Our role in India is more to look at delivery. How do you deliver large scale impact on the ground in different areas, whether it's health or sanitation, etc. And we quickly did realize that in most of the cases, the only way to do that is to work with government, because governments really have amazing scale in many areas. And we feel fortunate that this opportunity is there in India. For example, the other place where we work, which is Africa, there is less money coming from the government. So it's really more about donors spending their own money, or multilaterals like World Bank and others spending money. Whereas here you have the opportunity to partner with government. And I think the evolution that I've seen over the last 20 years is that literally every 5 years, you can see the government getting more and more focused on development relative to the previous 5 years. And now, nearly anybody you talk to senior in the government would be more than open and say, okay, can you help in this area? Do you have any expertise? Do you have any skills? And you can get really a lot done as long as you're open, you have an open mind about working with government.
I see. Thanks for that. Jen Mehta, back to you. And thanks for sharing how you got connected to the foundation initially. I'd really love to hear about maybe some of the initial challenges as the foundation ramped up its activities, given the original mission that the founder had and the vision from there. And also when you engaged in the rural areas and lower tier cities. We'd love to hear sort of some of the challenges that were encountered and perhaps some of the adaptations that came in the midst of that process.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. And I think it will set the context for the present discussion. So first I'll tell you that we are a young foundation. We are not as old as the other foundations. We started in 2009. And as we started young and of our founders, if you go into that, they were connected to one single source. And that was Hansji Maharaj, who was a great spiritual leader in North India. And that's where the name comes, the Hans Foundation. Mr. Manoj Bhargav, he came he was very young. He came to India. He was, I think, 12 or 13 years old. And he became a monk under the tutelage of Hansji Maharaj. And from there, he went he has seen life very closely in the cities, in the rural areas. And that's how he got connected to the charity. He was, I believe, for a long time working under Hansji Maharaj, or he was a monk under him. And then he went back and set up his business and became a billionaire. And the second founder, the chairperson, Shweta Rawat, she is the granddaughter of Hansji Maharaj. So both of them are connected to single source. And her mother is a great philanthropist and comes from a village in Pauri in Uttarakhand. So they were all connected to the roots. So when we started, we decided that we have to go to the rural areas, tier 2, tier 3 cities, and we have to work with the grassroots organizations. We started with the grassroots organizations so that we can see the impact immediately. That was an initial philosophy. But it had its own challenges. Challenges in the sense initial success was there. They could give results, but as we started and started scaling up, we found it very challenging because as the grants became bigger and bigger, they didn't have the capacity. They did not have the managerial skills. They could not handle the finances. There was mismanagement on the part of these small time grassroots NGOs. And we did not have much of experience working with the large NGOs. We thought that if we have to connect to the roots, we have to go to the rural area, we have to, connect with them. So that's how we started, and then we changed course. By the time we were in, and we expanded very rapidly. By the time we were 5 years old, we were funding about 220 organizations in the country. And we were, having 300 projects running, and there was a very small team. It was a team of just 15 people who was managing like you are 6 or 7. With 15 people managing 300 projects was an impossible task. Monitoring was a problem. Accounting was a problem. So at that time, in 2014, when I took over, so these were the challenges which we were posed, and we had to, remodel our approach. Of course, the vision remained same. We remodel our approach, which means and I believe this is the livelihood week. So I'll tell you what happened. I'll give you one good example, one bad example. Please let me know the timings so that we can, I can finish or I can make it more concise. Like we started two very small projects, one in Rajasthan and one in Gujarat. This was a livelihood project giving cattle and goats to the families for their livelihood. And we decided that we'll give 2 cattle or buffaloes per family in the villages, and we'll set up plants to process milk and make milk products. Initially, it was only giving the animals, and then it started expanding. As we started expanding, this became a very big project. Those were very small time NGOs. This went into 40 crores in Alwar, that is Rajasthan, and 30 crores worth of project in Gujarat, that is Run of Kutch. And they could not handle this project properly. There was a mismanagement. One of the NGOs lost their FCRA, registration also in the process. And that is the time we realized that we should not, expand with the same set of people who were handling small projects. Not that they could not. I think the capacity building was required. Managerial skills were required to do that project. A good example is we later on in the year 2016 started working with Sadhguru, a very big project for 10,000 farmers. And at the confluence of Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Madhya Pradesh, where we were funding for 10,000 farmers. This was again a livelihood project, farming project, and it went off very well, very smooth. It was at the confluence of these 3, states. So these were the examples of livelihood which I could pick up, good and bad. So Sadhguru is a very established NGO, has been doing a very good work in the field. And these were new NGOs with which we started this dairy and giving these animals. It started very small, but then we added 900 families, 1,000 families, and so many animals. It became totally unmanageable. This is how is the evolution you learn from your mistakes. So these were the challenges we faced in the beginning.
Thanks for sharing that, Jan Mehta. Alkesh, you've mentioned BMGF's active partnership with government in your programs, and we understand that this is done in the interest of achieving scale. Perhaps you can share with us what are some lessons on how to partner effectively with government, and also maybe, my assumption with regards to scale is there could sometimes be a trade-off with the depth of impact. Do you find that to be the case, and how do you navigate that?
Right. Yeah. So, I think working with government, I think the first thing that perhaps we have to realize it's the government's program, right? And we are helping them or supporting them or providing some technical assistance, managerial assistance, whatever way you want to call it. But finally, it is their program and their decision. So I think one has to come to grips with this fact. And then I think it becomes much easier to partner with government. Because if you start thinking this is your program, because you've put in some money as a donor, it won't work because the money we put in as a donor is minuscule relative to the size of their programs. So we might put in 10 crores into a project a year where they are spending 1,000 crores. And you can see it's like 1% or sometimes 5%, but it's primarily their program. So I think one has to really look at it from their point of view, that what do they want to achieve? What are their constraints? What are their opportunities? When can they move fast? When can they move slow, etc., etc. For example, procurement is always a challenge in government. And given the rules of how they have to procure, they often have to procure through L1, the lowest cost bidder, etc. So it puts a lot of constraints on government. And these are some of the challenges you face. But if you get in with the mindset that this is the government's program and we are here to help and make both the program better and make the government officials who are working on that program look better, I think the chances of success go up drastically. Now, to the second challenge of working with government really is that the senior officials change very regularly. So you might have people for 1 year, 2 years, if you're very, very lucky, 3 years. It's complex because your project often, when you want to reach statewide scale or nationwide scale, is a 5 to 10 year project. So you have to document what is there and get it accepted by government. So we often have MOUs with government, and you need some governance structure. So often we do have governance structures like a program advisory committee where the secretary and others, the senior officials, review the project and the progress every 6 months, while you work with the day-to-day staff every day. So I think these are some of the ways to work with government to mitigate risk and the mental model you need to work with government. Coming to your last question about impact and trade-off. So the impact and trade-off question is something like this, and I'll perhaps give 3-4 examples, which says, there are times where you don't need trade-offs, there are times when you do need trade-offs, or there are trade-offs. So we work through partners like General Mehta's organization, Hans, does. We don't execute ourselves. So we have a partner in UP. Post-COVID, we put a small team of a few people with the senior officials of the Rural Development Ministry to help them streamline NREGA, which is our Food for Work program, which is, in theory meant to give you 100 days of livelihood per family. And typically, very, very, very rarely does anyone get 100 days work. You get 50 days work or 25 days work or whatever. But this year, with that small team of a few people, the government was very driven to see that people get 100 days of work, and more than 250,000 people got 100 days of work. Right now, here there was no trade-off. You could get a decent size outcome with just a few people because they were placed at a very senior level, and the officials in the government were completely driven to achieve, NREGA work for, especially for migrants coming back, just given the COVID situation. But the reason you could do this, and there's little trade-off, is it's a simple intervention, which is that NREGA has been going on for many years. You just have to set the systems to say, okay, here are some projects, define the projects that offer 100 days work with the people on the ground to see that they understand that the government's changing their mindset and wants to give 100 days work, and you can actually get it done pretty fast. So there is very little trade-off here. You can get impact with very little resources from our side. For example, the resources and the directions, everything come from government. All you're doing is providing some technical assistance. There are others where there is a trade-off. So let me give you one example again in livelihoods, which is, say we are helping farmers to get into value addition. So there are two models here, and I'll describe the two models. One where we get good outcomes, but at a small scale, and the trade-off when we try to do it at a large scale. So in the small scale, we have a grant in one district where we say, okay, our partner will work on the ground to get things done. So you have a lot of control over what happens, and the project is most likely going to succeed, just given our partners on the ground making things happen. And the government's contribution is that they tap into the government schemes to get money released. So I'll give you an example. In the last month, they worked with 56 farmers to get micro irrigation schemes, which the government has put in 41 lakhs for rupees, which would be about $1,500 per or 1 lakh per person. They have got low-cost pack houses. So the beauty of this is one farmer gets a pack house, but it benefits 100 farmers. So they are trying to do it for free, and they've put in the application to the government for funding this. Each of this would be about $5,000, and the government will fund it, right? So the government has various schemes you can fund. The last example I'll give you is a preservation unit, which allows farmers to store their goods, which again, there are two projects for two farmers. Each of them would be about $5,000. Government will put in the money. So you are able to leverage government money, but your partners on the ground getting things done. And while I'm saying one or two, each of these projects will benefit, say a warehouse will benefit 100 farmers or 200 farmers. So you do have that leverage, and you do have the money coming in from government, but you have your people on the ground or your partner on the ground getting all this done, and it makes it more likely to succeed. But this is not our typical model. We have done this because for us, it's a pilot. Our typical model is to say that, okay, we will work with the government at a state level or a district level and put in a small team and guide the government's officials to say, okay, go and meet the farmers, set up FPOs, set up producer groups, and then tap into your own funds that you have, like I said, preservation units, low-cost pack houses, micro irrigation schemes, etc. And then it is not your people on the ground or your NGO on the ground, it is government staff, right? But the scale is enormous. It's like, for example, we work with SHGs, and there are 70 million women in SHGs. So you can actually hope to change livelihoods of few million people in a 5-year period. But then you cannot expect the same quality, the same outcome, because you don't have the NGO putting such heavy technical resources on the ground. So that is sometimes the trade-off. Yeah, so I'll pause there.
Thanks, Alkesh, for those very detailed examples. And the key message around leverage that you can apply on your funding to partner with governments, I think that's one key point. And also how you manage the relationship to navigate these different scenarios around possible trade-offs. Yeah, I think there's a lot we can learn as lessons here. Maybe a question to both of you. Your organizations represent some of the largest grant-making entities in India. And the question is, does engaging in tier 2, tier 3 or rural areas require deep pockets? And what's your advice for other grant-making entities that do not sort of come from similar levels of funding? Jen Mehta, would you like to go first?
Okay. I'll first like to comment on what Alkesh said. Hans Foundation is largely a funding organization. And we are also working with many governments now. We have MOUs with many governments, but we have developed various models. Like I said, we continue working with the smaller NGOs. We continue working with the established and large NGOs. We have composite functioning, like the large NGOs subletting or hiring another NGOs. That also is a model which we are applying. And then we are having collaboration with, right now we have collaboration with 7 governments. And the biggest one is with the Maharashtra government, Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand, we committed, like I said, 500 crores for 5 years. And the Nagaland, where we have a very large livelihood project. It is not like what his foundation is doing. We are putting our own money into it. Majority of the funds are coming from us. It is the technical help, like the electricity, roads, and things like those, which the government pitches in. Our model is slightly different. We don't give the money to the government, we spend the money ourselves. And then we have also started working on the self-implementation model. There are projects like Integrated Village Development Program, and like I told you, in Nagaland, we have a very large project that is plantation, tea plantations. It's a community-driven project, and we have a MOU with the government. The government is assisting us in other areas other than the funds. So this is a self-implemented project. And another project in Maharashtra where 1,000 villages social transformation program is going on. Our money is less. Government is pulling in a lot of money in that. So 1,000 villages is a very big number. So these are the models which we have developed or evolved over the years. And if we find that if we have to scale up, government participation is a must. Now your question was, can you repeat your question now?
Whether the size of the funding affects the ability to operate in those tier 2, tier 3 and rural areas?
My take is different on that, Kevin. I'll be very brief in this.
Okay.
My take is, you rightly said that these 4 metropolitan cities, majority of the funds are consumed or come to these 4 cities. Why we are not able to take up the rural areas? One, that people don't want to go to the rural areas. Even the NGOs don't want to work in the rural areas. You take health sector, you take education sector. There are no facilities over there for their children. Like a specialist in the medical field will not go unless there is a mall, there is a good school for his children, because he's done the specialty, he's certain age. So the problem is not one-sided, that people don't want to fund. Problem is on the other side also, that people are not, people in this NGO sector do not want to work in tier 3 cities or the rural areas. And that has been our emphasis right from the beginning, especially in the field of disability. people are suffering, because most of the disability people in the rural areas do not get any kind of help. And we've been trying to reach out to them. We have started a very big project on the rural areas as far as disability is concerned. So my take is different. These tier 2 and tier 3 cities, they are going to be the engines of growth in the future. The government is now focusing on tier 2, tier 3 cities development. Infrastructure is building up. If you have heard the what the road transport minister said, that we are building 30 kilometers of worth of road every day, and he is spreading the network of all these roads and the infrastructure which is coming up in these cities now. So I feel that it is not the question of deep pockets or people not funding it. It's a question of motivating our youth. It is a question of finding volunteers. It is a question of, if we can, like the European countries or like the West, they put this aspect as one of the very important aspects that you have worked with in the social sector or not. Even if you have to get an admission in MBA course, if you have worked in the social sector, it gets a weightage. And you, even if you have scored less in GMAT, but you have some service in such a sector, they give you weightage for that. If we can make this kind of a priority or this kind of a ruling in our country also, in India, I think more and more youth will go towards serving while they are either completing their education, or even after education they'll go into these fields. And third, we need more institutes like Tata, TIS, Tata Institute of Social Sciences in the country. Hans Foundation is going to build one in Nagaland, in Chuchumliang. They have donated 150 acres of land for this purpose. I feel we have to have more institutes of quality. I'm not saying we have to have more professionals in this field who are qualified if we have to go to tier 2 and tier 3 cities and the rural areas. So that's my take on that. Alkesh.
Thanks for that, Mehta. And very, very interesting perspective on how promoting active citizenship should be a priority to address some of these issues. And Alkesh, we'd love to hear your views on this too.
Yeah. So Kevin, the advantage of working with the government is that you don't need big pockets, right? Because the government who's putting in the bulk of the money. So there are 2-3 roles, and what you really need is expertise in whatever area you believe you're working in. So there are 2-3 roles that folks who don't have deep pockets could play if they want to work and choose to work with government. One is just sharing their lessons. That requires not much any money as such, but really working with senior folks in government to share models that work. And often governments are very, very open because they have to deliver to an amazing extent. The expectations on them are very high. Politicians today want to see development, and they push the bureaucrats to say, what can you change? So one is just sharing lessons. The second is saying, fine, we will do a demonstration project. But the crux is to do it in partnership with government, because if it's done in partnership with government, by government, even if it's your money and government has some governance, they are more likely to take it up to scale. So again, you don't need much money to do a demonstration project. And we found that demonstration projects can be very successful in getting interest from government to say, yes, this works on the field. There's no substitute for seeing it on the field. You get hundreds of government officials from different states coming to see it, and then it can be scaled up. The third part is often, and it is true, just because you put up a demonstration and the government puts it as part of their plans, doesn't mean it will scale up well or at the pace you would like to. So then it is the third step is saying that even if you don't have a lot of money, can you provide some technical assistance? And then it is your choice. Can you provide a small team at the state level or at the national level to help governments think through how to scale it up? Or provide a small team if you want to work in a small town, tier 2 town, to say, work with them, look, you will be the urban local body there to scale it up in that town. So it just depends on what the level of money you have, but there is a lot to be done. It's about your expertise and your mindset about whether you want to work with government and are willing to make the mental model that it's not your program, it's the government's program.
Yeah, thanks, Alkesh, for those important lessons that and also suggestions on roles that potential potentially interested funders could consider as they walk down this journey. My colleagues have signaled to me that we need to go into the final question. So I'd love to hear from both of you in terms of your advice or guidance for how we can engage local, capital owners in tier 2 and tier 3 cities to sort of be more strategic in their philanthropy. And what can we do to unlock the capital, some of this capital that's actually inherent in those areas. And maybe Alkesh, you can start first, and Jen Mehta.
Okay.
Yeah. So I suppose this might come across now as a broken record because I'm not saying anything new to what I've already said, which is I think the role of philanthropy should be not to just especially strategic philanthropy should not be just to say, fine, I've set up 5 schools, I've set up, fed so many people or put up 3 hospitals. It should go beyond that, and you just have to see how you can come up with models that bigger players like government, and sometimes it need not be government or private sector, can take up if you feel it's a social venture, but it can reach scale. And I think that's where you need new technologies, new ideas, and you need the leverage of government.
Thanks, Alkesh. Jen Mehta?
I think I'll take from where Alkesh left. Means he's been talking about government participation. I would go a step further and I'll say that we should involve the local CSR and the big industry into it. And they should not only work in the areas where they are interested, where it gives them return, because they're always, their endeavor is that if they get publicity, or they will work only in the areas where they set up their own, industry and things like those. So if we can involve them, and this initiative has to be at the apex level. I have been privy to one of the initiatives the last Honorable Chief Minister of Maharashtra did, Mr. Devendra Fadnavis. He gathered almost about everyone who is who in the industry under one umbrella. They set up a foundation. The government set up a foundation, and which is called VSTF. And they brought all these players together, including the Hans Foundation, of course, and Tatas, Mahindras, then others in this field. And they said, you set up a corpus. And through this corpus, we'll run this NGO, and we'll go to the rural areas, we'll go to the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and they reduce the chain of command. Because government, the problem is, the decision making is very much delayed. What we can do in the private in one day, it takes 1 month. I'm not criticizing, but that's how we have inherited this system. We have the bureaucracy, we have, the functioning of these people is like that, and they have to be, responsible to the public. It's a public money. So if you can bring in these players at a platform, and it is driven by the apex level, and all these NGOs get together, the CSR, the NGOs, they get together, pool in money. Collaboration is the, I think, mantra today, that you can really reach out to the unreached areas, where the government also plays a, like, I'll tell you, I'll give you a specific example. We pulled in about 10 crores for this venture in Maharashtra. Others also 10 crores, 5 crores, somebody 3 crores, like that, and they built up a corpus. Now government has a lot of schemes. They don't know how to implement it or how to effectively implement it. What Alkesh is saying, that they can provide the technical input. So all these people coming together can bring in a revolution in tier 2, tier 3 cities and the rural areas if we can work collaboratively. Collaboration is the mantra for the future. That's my take on that.
Thanks for that, Jen Mehta. And thanks both of you gentlemen for the key insights and advice that you've shared in our session today. Unfortunately, we've run out of time and need to wrap up this session. So thank you again for taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
So this session has been made possible with the kind support of our festival partners, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Sesame Workshop India, Rockefeller Foundation, COVID Action Collab, BNV Advisory Services, the British Asian Trust, WPP India CSR Foundation, Catalyst Management Services, and Satva. Up next, the session on building resilient and sustainable social enterprises will be starting, and you can find the link to that session in the agenda tab. Please join my colleague Hiral from ABPN's India team, who will be kicking off the session and introducing the topic as well as moderator and speakers. So thank you again, Jen, Meta, and Alkesh, and to everyone else out there, please enjoy the rest of this festival.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, LK.
See you.
Thanks a lot.